I want to tell you about this book, written by this amazing young scientist, Hannah Ritchie. I first heard of her a couple of years ago when I saw her TED Talk, and then I read an interview with her in the New York Times. I love her approach. She uses data science to see where we are with environmental problems, and I agree with her critique of catastrophizing. These doomsday messages do more harm than good. Hannah has convinced me that there's a better, more optimistic, and honest way forward.
It's become strangely normal to tell our kids that they're going to die from climate change. If sea level rise doesn't get them, then a wildfire will, or a global famine, or crop failures, maybe a fatal heat wave, the insect apocalypse, or the fishless oceans. These are the headlines we've all been told will be the end of humanity. So we shouldn't be surprised then that young people today feel crippled with anxiety. A large international survey asked 10,000 young people about their attitudes to climate change. More than half said they think humanity is doomed, 3/4 find the future frightening, and more than 1 in 3 are hesitant to have children of their own. Young people today truly feel like they could be the last generation. In fact, prominent activist groups actually take on this very name. Now I get this feeling. I've been there. I used to feel like humanity was doomed. Despite having multiple environmental degrees, felt completely helpless to do anything about it. But I'm a data scientist, and after years poring over the data on how far humanity's come and how quickly things are now moving, my perspective on this has changed. I think we've got this framing upside down. Far from being the last generation, I think we'd be the first generation to be sustainable.
We need people to wake up. We need people to start paying attention. We need to share the apocalyptic environmental story far and wide.
It's true that if we want things to change, we have to bring attention to the magnitude of the problem, but that's a long way from telling kids they're ruined and they have no future.
Why should we bother? We're already screwed, so what's the point in trying?
That's one of the biggest problems with these doomsday messages. They leave us feeling paralyzed. And far from making us more effective in driving change, doomsday messaging robs us of any motivation to do so. But we don't have the option of giving up. Accepting defeat on climate change is an indefensibly selfish position to take.
I don't think my personal choices will make any difference at all. I mean, what can one person's actions really change?
When you're staring at graphs of global emissions or millions of tons of plastic, your own choices seem microscopic. But look at how change actually happens. It's almost never one heroic decision at the top. It's millions of individual decisions that suddenly tip something from niche to normal. Look how fast people switched from coal to cleaner electricity once it became cheaper. Your choices matter. Your choices add up. One person eating less beef or wasting less food doesn't change the world, but millions of people doing it absolutely does. Just like millions of families getting access to electricity and clean water every day has transformed global living standards. And your choices send signals. Every time someone buys an electric car or a plant-based burger or votes for a party that takes climate seriously, they're telling companies and politicians, this is what we want. So, no, you can't fix climate change on your own, and that shouldn't be the goal. But your actions can help move us from no one is doing this to everyone is doing this. And that's how big shifts have always happened. The world has never been truly sustainable because we've never achieved both human well-being and environmental protection at the same time. We need to find a way to provide a good life for everyone today and opportunity for future generations and other species.
Well, haven't there been indigenous groups who did achieve a harmonious balance with other species in the environment?
Yes, many indigenous groups have managed this, as well as being protective of biodiversity and the ecosystems. But the communities that achieved environmental sustainability were always small, and that's because the rates of child mortality were high. Half of children died before reaching puberty. In fact, there's no better time to be alive than today.
No way.
No way!
No way.
No way.
No way.
No way.
It's true. Let's look at these 7 key measures where the data shows us that things have definitely gotten better. Child mortality. For most of human history, your odds of living to adulthood were 50-50. Half of children died. This was true across many time periods and locations. Now, rates of child mortality have plummeted to 4%, and every single country has made massive progress in the last 50 years. Maternal mortality rates have also plummeted in recent centuries. Life expectancy. People are living longer across all regions of the world. Hunger and malnutrition. The world has made huge strides in global food production. We now produce far, far more food than we need to feed the world population. Access to basic resources. Every day, 300,000 people get access to electricity, and a similar number get clean water for the first time. And this has been the case every day for a decade. Education. The world we are building with better healthcare, technology, connectivity, and groundbreaking innovations rests on the power of education and learning. Extreme poverty. The number of people in extreme poverty has fallen by 128,000 since yesterday. We can be the first generation to achieve a sustainable world. We humans are capable of solving problems, really big ones that would have seemed unsolvable to those who came before us. We are a flawed species that makes mistakes, but we are not doomed. Hannah Ritchie says, we have the opportunity to be the first generation that leaves the environment in a better state than we found it. In the past, human progress had to come at the cost of the environment. But technology and innovation means that we're very quickly decoupling these impacts, such that this conflict is no longer true. So let's look at this graph that Hannah Ritchie made for her TED Talk. In 1938, when her grandparents were born, 9 tons of CO2 were emitted per person in the UK. In 1965, when her parents were born, it was 11.5 tons per person. Today, it has gone down to just 5.5 tons per person. Hannah's carbon footprint today is less than half that of her grandparents when they were her age. That's despite the fact that she lives a much more extravagant lifestyle.
So, where are we today? Are we on track to tackle climate change, or are we doomed? I mean, the rise of booming economies in Asia means that even if we Europeans manage to reduce our CO2 emissions, the rest of the world will keep adding billions of tons of CO2 to the atmosphere, right?
Climate change is a massive but solvable problem. We already have many of the solutions we need, and others are in the pipeline. You wouldn't guess it from public discussions, though. Newspapers, documentaries, podcasts, and commentaries are filled with misconceptions and myths that plant deep seeds of doubt about our ability to make progress. What we have to do is look at what the data is telling us. First of all, the world has already passed the peak of per capita emissions. That's the average amount per person. It happened more than a decade ago. Most people are unaware of this. Progress is happening, and it's happening quickly. Solar energy costs have fallen 99.8% since 1970. That's 90% in the last decade alone. Battery prices have fallen 98% since 1990. A Tesla battery went from costing $1 million to $12,000 in 2022. Coal is dying. The UK, the birthplace of coal, went from 52% of electricity from coal when Hannah was born to less than 2% today. Sales of gasoline-powered cars are going down. They peaked in 2017.
Well, I've heard that we are destined for 4, 5, or 6 degrees Celsius warming, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it.
Hannah Ritchie used to think that as well, only a few years ago. She says, in a world without climate policies, that would be true. That would be a very scary world indeed. My perspective flipped quickly after studying the data, not the newspaper headlines. At her job at Our World in Data, Hannah compiles future climate predictions and updates them every year. Every time they get closer and closer to the pathways we need to follow to stay below 2 degrees Celsius. The most encouraging thing is how these pathways have changed over time as countries have made small, steady improvements. A decade ago, a warming trajectory of 3.5 to 4 degrees Celsius seemed inevitable. Today, many are optimistic we can get very close to 2 degrees. The other big change is that moving to a low-carbon, sustainable economy is becoming easier as technologies that reduce carbon emissions are becoming as cheap as other technologies. And climate action is moving in the right direction. For example, a lot of work is being done to stop plastic pollution.
Yeah, isn't there a young Dutch inventor guy working on this? I remember he started trying to deal with the plastic problem when he was in high school.
Yes, his name is Boyan Slat. He's a doer, not a talker. He doesn't just study problems, he tries to fix them. In 2011, when he was just 16, he went scuba diving in Greece. He saw more plastic bags than fish, and he knew something had to be done. He wondered, why can't we just clean this up? So he made ocean plastic pollution his high school science project. Then in his 2012 TEDx talk, when he was only 17, he described his ideas for how to get rid of all the plastic in the ocean. In 2013, he quit his studies in aerospace engineering at the University of Delft. With only 300 euros in savings, he started the Ocean Cleanup, a non-profit organization that is developing and scaling technologies to rid the world's oceans of plastic. The organization aims to remove 90% of floating ocean plastic by 2040. By December 2024, they had already removed 20 million kilograms of waste from oceans globally. Boyan Slat is pretty amazing. His ocean cleanup is actively cleaning up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and has also deployed the interceptors he invented in some of the world's most polluting rivers to prevent plastic reaching the ocean in the first place. Boyan says, when people say something is impossible, the sheer absoluteness of that statement should be a motivation to investigate further.
What are the biggest environmental problems, anyway?
Good question. air pollution. Did you know that London air was once more polluted than the world's most polluted cities today? Today, Delhi is often at or near the top of the list for the most polluted cities worldwide. But if London from the 18th or 19th century were to be in the competition, it would win hands down. How do we stop air pollution? Stop burning stuff. We need to find ways of producing energy without burning things.
I've heard that open wood fires and stoves are an eco-friendly way to heat your home.
Unfortunately, that's not at all true. Burning wood is what many of the world's poorest are trying to move away from. It creates tons of pollution. It's much worse for the environment than gas or electricity. Here are a few things that do help stop air pollution. Driving the cleanest cars possible, electrical vehicles, cycling, walking, and taking public transport, ditching fossil fuels for renewables and nuclear. Climate change. The time for debating whether climate change is or isn't happening is over. Climate change is happening, and human emissions of greenhouse gases are responsible.
With AI data centers guzzling electricity, there's no way we're still on track for a safe climate. We've basically blown any hope of staying under 2 degrees, haven't we?
AI is adding noticeable pressure to electricity systems, but current evidence says it won't devour global energy. Whether it becomes a climate problem depends on where data centers are built and how quickly we replace fossil power with clean sources.
AI is clearly out of control. We should all just stop using it.
Switching off AI won't solve climate change. Powering AI with clean energy and using it to cut emissions elsewhere is how it could actually help. Hannah Ritchie says that we won't be able to keep warming under 1.5 degrees, but she's confident that we can keep it under 2 degrees. So it's not the end of the world. Some unexpected countries are showing the rest of us how it's done. In 2014, Uruguay was getting just 5% of its electricity from wind. Now it's close to 50%. Way to go, Uruguay. So, who's responsible? China is responsible for 29% of the world's current emissions. The USA is responsible for 14%. The European Union is responsible for 8% of global emissions. And India is responsible for 7% of emissions, although they have 18% of the world population. And in terms of historical responsibility, the United States has been responsible for 25% of all emissions since 1750. China, half as much as the US. The EU, 17%. And India, just 3%. But when we turn climate change into a blame game, it never ends.
Solar panels and electrical vehicles are just too expensive. People in developing countries can't afford them.
Until recently, this transition did seem impossible. But this is changing, and it's changing fast. It won't be long before these become the better options. So let's look at some big impact actions you can take to fight against climate change. Eat less meat, especially beef. Switch to electric vehicles, or don't have a car at all. Reduce flights. Optimize home energy with insulation, heat pumps, and solar panels. And push for a carbon tax. We need to put a price on carbon so that even the strongest climate deniers will still end up making more sustainable choices. So now we need to talk about deforestation. Why should you care? Well, forests are the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet. They store massive amounts of carbon. And when forests are cut down, they release carbon, which was locked up for hundreds or thousands of years. And although deforestation has fallen from its peak in the 1980s, the rates are still worryingly high. Tragically, nearly all of this loss is happening in the tropics, where biodiversity is highest.
Why are we losing so many trees? I don't understand.
Deforestation is almost entirely about farming.
Can we please get some good news here? I'm starting to feel panicky.
Okay, you need a success story? Here's a success story for you. Crop yields. Since the 19th century, corn yields in the United States, as an example, have grown sixfold, from 2 tons per hectare to 12 tons per hectare. That means that the amount of land used to produce corn in the U.S. has not increased in over a century, despite the changes in corn production.
Oh, I get it. So if they are able to get higher crop yields, then they don't have to cut down more trees to grow more. So there'll be less deforestation, right?
Exactly. And something else to help reduce deforestation: rich countries should pay poorer countries to keep their forests standing.
What? Why should we pay poor countries to stop cutting down their forests?
Because halting deforestation is actually a relatively cheap way of stopping carbon emissions. If leaders care about climate change and biodiversity as much as they claim, it's a no-brainer. Now we need to talk about food. If we split the world's food production equally between everyone, we could each have at least 5,000 calories a day, more than twice what we need.
No way.
No way.
No way!
No way.
No way.
No way.
Or, to put it another way, we currently produce enough food for a global population twice the size that it is today. That's right. Hunger and famine still exist today, but they're political and social in nature. The limits to us feeding everyone are entirely self-imposed.
Well, then where the heck is all that food going? I don't understand.
The problem? We feed livestock and cars, not people. Only half of the world's grain goes directly to human food. The US uses 35% of its grain to make biofuels and 60% to feed livestock. Germany feeds 64% to its livestock and 6% goes to biofuels. And when we feed livestock for meat, most of those calories are wasted. That is, only a small percentage of the calories we feed to animals are converted into meat that we humans consume. And the bigger the animal, the more calories are wasted. Take a look. Beef, we put 100 calories in, and only 3 calories come out, so that's 97% wasted. And here's another surprising fact. Did you know that about half of the people in the world wouldn't be around today without synthetic fertilizers? And did you know that one of the scientists responsible for developing those synthetic fertilizers was from Heidelberg? The German scientists Karl Bosch, you've probably heard of him, and Fritz Haber won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for creating synthetic fertilizers.
So, what should we do to help the food the world produces reach more people and not end up as a biofuel or being pooped out by some animal?
Good question. First, pay attention to this food hierarchy. The worst is eating beef and lamb, and then dairy, pork, chicken, and at the bottom, so the best for the environment, are plant-based foods, tofu, beans, and grains. And the differences here are not small. Literally 100 times the difference between eating beef or plant-based proteins. You ready to move on to problem number 5? It's a complex situation. The World Wildlife Fund's Living Planet Index shows almost half of animal populations are increasing and almost half are decreasing. But there's no doubt that we're destroying biodiversity at record rates. Many species are speeding towards extinction.
Are we headed for another dinosaur-level extinction event?
Since 1500, about 1.4% of the Earth's mammals and 1.3% of birds have gone extinct. That's a lot of animals, but this is far from the 75% threshold for mass extinction. The speed at which these extinctions have happened, however, raises alarm bells. But it's not too late. The bleakness of this picture depends on the assumption that species continue to go extinct as quickly as they have over the last few centuries. That is a massive assumption, and one that is wrong. This mass extinction event is unlike any of the others because there is a handbrake. We are the handbrake. We have the option to stop and turn things around. If we make the right decisions today, then we can slow, possibly even reverse this damage. In some places, we already are. European bison, back from the brink of extinction. American bison, 500,000 today, a 1,000-fold increase from its lowest point. 24 mammal species and the loggerhead turtle are making comebacks. And many European mammals have been recovering in the last 50 years.
So what can we do?
So when we look at what works, the solutions will seem familiar to you. We need to stop deforestation to preserve habitats. We need to slow climate change. We need to stop plastic pollution. We need to eat less meat, and that would mean that we would need less farming land. And we need to increase crop yields, which also would reduce the farmland expansion. We're getting close to the end. On to problem 6, ocean plastics.
Oh, this is really, really bad. There's like a huge, gigantic plastic swirling sewer in the middle of the ocean.
Yes, you're referring to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is located halfway between Hawaii and California. The ocean currents form a gyre, the Pacific vortex, where floating debris accumulates and is sucked towards the center. Most of it is plastic. Some is more than 50 years old. The patch stretches around 1.6 million square kilometers. That's an area 3 times the size of France. 80% of the plastic there comes from the fishing industry, abandoned nets and lines. Approximately 1 million tons of plastic enters the ocean each year. That's 0.3% of our plastic waste.
1 million tons of plastic ending up in the ocean? Why is that? Are people just leaving stuff on the beach? I don't get it.
The problem is waste management. Not all countries are doing a good job of that, yet. Of all the environmental problems we have, stopping plastic pollution is the simplest. We know how to do it. We don't need to wait for new innovations or technological breakthroughs. With some basic investments, the world could solve this problem tomorrow. On to our last problem, overfishing. We don't know how many fish there are in the world's oceans, but that doesn't stop us from monitoring the overfishing of certain fish species. Many countries have learned how to manage their fish stocks much more sustainably than they had in the past. Endangered fish stocks have made a comeback, but unmonitored and unregulated fishing techniques, where large amounts of fish are caught indiscriminately, are increasing across some parts of the world. We need to work against this.
But what about fish farming? Is that a sustainable option?
In fact, it is thanks to fish farming or aquaculture that we have been able to put a pause on the number of fish populations that are being overexploited. Many fish species, such as tuna, cod, haddock, and salmon, are now healthy and sustainably managed in Europe or North America. Whales. The world acted just in time. The whale populations are recovering.
So, what do we need to do now?
Well, here's what works. Most fish are now climate friendly, But we need to continue close monitoring of fish stocks and push for sustainable fishing quotas. We need to keep going with fish farming, and of course we need to limit climate change to protect coral reefs.
Doesn't this all just go away if we focus on depopulation? Isn't the global population low-key out of control?
This isn't true. The global population growth rate, the change from one year to the next, peaked a long time ago. In the 1960s, it was growing at more than 2% per year. Since then, this rate has more than halved. This is happening because women are having far fewer children than in the past. As a result, the world has already passed peak child. According to statistics compiled by the United Nations, the number of children in the world peaked in 2017 and is now falling. Take a moment to think about what that means. There may never be more children in the world than there were in 2017.
I feel like I am constantly being hit with images, videos, and reports of disasters, and it seems like things just keep getting worse. How can we tell what's real and what's not?
More reports of disasters do not necessarily mean disasters are happening more often. Bad news gets attention. It's hard to know what to trust, but the data does not lie. At places like Our World in Data, thousands of scientists compile evidence to show what is working and what is not, and we often know how to make progress on big problems. The world has the resources to reduce suffering, but a major reason we don't do it is that we don't use this research and data enough. But people like Hannah Ritchie are working now to share this knowledge and to show that the data gives many reasons for hope. So here are some big things you can actually do. You can get involved in political action. You can vote with your wallet. You can donate to effective causes. And think about how you spend your time. These problems won't solve themselves. We need innovators and entrepreneurs to create new technologies. We need funders to give them money. And we need policymakers to support environmental action.
We need to use data to inspire, to show what the problems are, but also what the solutions are, and we need to show real signs of progress from countries, individuals, companies. Historically, our sustainability equation went like this. It was one or the other. You could not have both at the same time. We can be the first generation that does achieve both. Now, the emphasis here is on can. None of this is inevitable. In fact, it's not even inevitable that we have this opportunity in the first place. We're only here because of the relentless work of environmentalists, activists, scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, communicators determined to make the world a better place. They have brought us here, and we need to take that forward. We need to do it bigger, and we need to do it much, much faster. But we do have the opportunity to be the first generation that builds a sustainable world. Let's take it. Thank you.
We have the power to build a sustainable world.